Now boarding our first class Ultra Gold passengers. Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey through the lives of others, where empathy knows no bounds. Your host, Neil Matthews, is absolutely thrilled that you're here. Please take your seat as we're about to take flight into season 16. Be sure to hold on tight, because Take Flight isn't just about the skies above. It's about the depths within. We'll dive headfirst into the stories of those who faced turbulence and yet found the strength to rise above it all. So grab your headphones and get ready to soar with us as we launch into season 16. Thank you for flying with us. Buckle up and let's take flight.
Welcome in to Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really excited that you've chosen to hang out with us today. Really excited. You picked a great day to show up. I always say that. It's how you show up is really kind of half the battle sometimes. And we've shown up for the last 16 weeks now, talking about this idea of taking flight. Well, today is our final voyage, our final flight. So you picked a good time to jump on board. Of course, there was 15 or so other flights that are just as amazing as today's. So today, again, we close the chapter on season 16, and we will then begin our new season next week, which will be season 17, and we're calling it, I haven't told you yet. Okay, we'll just hang out for that. But I want to introduce you to our guest today. He hails from Oklahoma. And now how I remember Oklahoma is Oklahoma, where the wind goes sweeping down the plain. That's the best I got. But his name's Mark, and he is here today. Mark, I'm super excited that you're here. Welcome aboard Other People's Shoes. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great.
I got to ask you just before we get to my favorite question of all time, and that's this: first class, coach, or economy? Is economy and coach the same thing when you're talking about flying? What do you prefer?
I do not fly very much at all. I love being in my little city. And if I never flew, I'd be fine. I don't like travel. The place behind the front, whatever you call that, there's the cockpit and there's the big seats and there's the regular seats.
Yeah.
I'm the regular seat kind of guy.
You're not a first class guy.
I'm not a first class kind of guy.
You don't want the hot towel or the free headphones that they give out?
I'm just a regular guy.
Did they teach you that in Oklahoma, to be just regular people? Because I've heard that with you folks out there. The Sooner Nation, as you're affectionately called sometimes.
That's all I want to do is be. I'm not in pursuit of being anything more than regular.
All right.
Anyone who's a regular person, I think all of our lives are dynamic. All of us are. Regular is dynamic. Instead of waiting to be dynamic by some kind of accomplishment, then, I'm dynamic. No, all regular people are dynamic.
And I think so often we think of regular as being vanilla, as being just bleh, or meh, I think as the kids would say, meh. All right, well, Mark, let's figure this out for us. Help us with this, if you wouldn't mind. Your shoe size, sir?
12.
And then my favorite question, because hopefully it'll invoke sponsor dollars one of these days. It hasn't yet. Heard checks in the mail, perhaps. What style or brand are we rocking today?
I don't think I'm a shoe person at all. I don't care. I wear shoes that are very old because they just work, and I don't care. My wife last month was like, those dress shoes, it's time for new ones. Okay. So I bought some new dress shoes, and my flip-flops were falling apart. Friends said, hey, your flip-flops are falling apart. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. And he bought me some new ones. I'm like, okay, whatever. All you people take care of what I put on my feet. I don't care.
Well, to help, there should be two things you should invest in your life, at least in my mind. You should invest in a great pair of shoes because you're on your feet most of the time. Most of us are on our feet quite a bit. And then the second thing is you should invest in a great bed. Do sleep a lot.
We do have a great bed. My wife and I were at a charity event, and at the event, one thing they were giving away was a very nice bed that you had to pay like $20 to be in the drawing or something. And I did that and we won it. I tell you, it's been spectacular. Now with shoes, usually my kids are the ones who upgrade my life. My kids are all in their 20s now and they're like teaching me how to live better. For instance, they introduced me to sushi. I'm like, sushi's dumb. Like, that's awful. And then I tried it and I was like, where has this been the last 50 years of my life?
I tell people that all the time that hate sushi.
Yeah. So like now it's like every Wednesday, half price sushi, I'm going. And then they also 2 years ago bought me these shoes called Hokas.
Ah, there it is.
And I was like, why would a shoe cost so much? And I got to tell you, when I put it on, I was, okay, these are pretty good. And so every year they buy me a pair of Hokas for my birthday now.
That's the one brand I don't own.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's others. That's one that definitely comes to mind. I have a friend that swears by them. I just can't get around them. My wife actually bought a pair this last year. They just seem so heavy. And everyone tells me they're one of the lightest shoes out there. And so I used to run. I was a pretty active runner pre-COVID. Then the show kind of sort of took the spot of running. I haven't gotten on the Hoka wagon yet. Well, that's awesome. Help us with this. When you think about taking flight, and when we're sharing with you that that's our season, that's our theme, why is it so important for you to take flight?
If I don't take flight, bad things happen. Stagnancy is awful. For me, taking flight means I am pursuing my purpose and living the life I was made for. If I'm not doing that, what I do in its place is slowly die. Things inside of me just die. I work with a lot of men, and I would say with men, if a man doesn't feel like he's living in flight and he feels like he's grounded, that is very fertile playing ground for things like addiction, depression. If I'm not in flight, I'm grounded. And if I'm grounded, it's not good.
I wonder about this specifically involving your story. Now, I know a little bit of your story has to do with some weight loss and some weight issues. I don't think a lot of guys are willing to raise their hand to that and say, yep, that's me too. I think they may be stuck in this cell or this moment of darkness or this moment of being grounded, using our theme. For you in that moment, what makes you want to talk about things like that most men don't want to talk about?
I will talk about any weakness at any time with people who understand, who get it. The question is, why could I never talk about it before? I could never talk about it until I was 47 years old, even though it probably took root in me at the youngest, really young ages. I remember being in elementary school, like third grade, and a couple times a year, they'd bring the whole class down the hallway and stand outside the nurse's office. And the other side of the hallway, like 10 feet away, is a height and weight mechanism. And one at a time, they have you walk over and stand on it. And one person says the numbers out loud while someone else is recording the height and weight of whoever the kid is. And I remember that day having my numbers said, and my weight, I don't know, 10 pounds more than the other kid was enough. Oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. And this was the one area in my life that was constantly dogging me, but I would never, ever talk about it. I realized why. I hated how I looked at me. I hated how I saw myself in the context of my problem. I was afraid that if I told someone else my struggle, that they would see me the same way I saw me. And that sounded horrific. Who am I going to tell? A friend? We used to golf and have fun. Now is he going to be like checking in on my food consumption? Thought it would just ruin good friendship. Plus, I didn't think anything could help. Why would you bare your soul when nothing good can come from it? And so I didn't. Since then, when I finally did bare my soul, Jesus said, if you want to find your life, lose it. When I finally lost my pride, I realized that being vulnerable is not about being weak. It's about finding the pathway to freedom. And so now I boast in weakness. I do not hide weakness. I want to live free. And vulnerability gives the ability for a person to live free instead of being entangled with our problems.
I think there's those that would suffer in silence. That is way easier and way more comfortable, and I can hide. I'm a big fan of turtles. I've always loved turtles from the standpoint of they have this really hard shell, and they're really good at hiding inside the shell.
Yep.
And they don't ever really want to venture out a lot. And when you do see them venture out a lot, they're very slow and sluggish. They just don't move very fast. Like I've never seen a fast turtle, just never have. They're grounded. All these things that I think men are turtles, essentially.
Yep.
I got told once, there's some relevance here. They had a baseball game. We have like this sort of minor league baseball team in our area called the Medford Rogues. And I got season tickets. So we were there every day all summer. And so I took my nephew because he really loves baseball. We got to know 3 of these guys that gravitated and loved on my nephew in an amazing way, kind of like a big brother type relationship. And in that, one of them, his name's Trey. He says to me one day, he says, Neil, man, you look like a backwards turtle. He's from Atlanta, black guy. And it kind of took me back for a second. I was like, backwards turtle. And then I looked down and fairly tall. I'm 6'2", kind of belly sticking out. And I thought, man, I'm skinny relatively everywhere else. Pregnancy type look to me. It would infuriate me. Every time I'd put a shirt on, it would infuriate me. Every time I'd look at a picture of myself, I'm like, wow, I have this gorgeous woman standing next to me. That's my wife, in case anyone's wondering, not anyone else. And then I look at me and I'm like, who's this fat mess next to her? Truly, this is a true story, Mark. I started having all these negative thoughts come over me, and I thought, what is going on with me? This is literally what I said out loud one day. I said, this is a girl issue. Why am I focused so much on my weight and so much on my appearance? I've never been that way. Like, I care about my shoes? Yes, absolutely. Care about wearing something in North Carolina? Yes, absolutely. I've had to buy 2XL shirts lately because of my belly. And I've tried and tried. Granted, I'm not going to the gym, killing it and working it out. About a year ago now, maybe a little longer, I went to low carb and even some intermittent fasting and even some spiritual fasting, which has helped. Still have this a little bit of a pooch and it drives me crazy. I've never been this obsessed with it until now. So respond to that if you can as I vomit on you.
The whole turtle thing, I think it's human instinct. Basically, the story of humanity is we were made to be fully alive and free. We don't know how to handle what's wrong with us. We don't know what to do with what goes wrong. And the very simple story in scripture from the very beginning is that Adam and Eve were so alive that they were described as naked and unashamed. I don't think they were like, oh, we're naked, this is cool. I'm like, I think they were so alive with what their life was, they didn't even recognize nakedness. But as soon as the fall happened, they lost that whole dimension of life. And now appearance is everything. And who am I? And who am I with you? And who am I with God? All of that is wildly questioned. So I think that simple story shows exactly what happens in all of our lives. We have these core instincts in the heart that maybe only a child has. And then things go wrong. And we're like, oh, I got to make sure I'm never that person again. I got to make sure nothing goes wrong again. It feels like the only answer is to keep hiding. There is no solution but to hide. And that's what my solution was for most of my life until I finally just stopped hiding. And then there was the revelation of everything. I realized I just wrote a book that I finished about this called One Step to Freedom. And the core of it is it was never about my problem. It was my response to my problem. And that living in hiding is what was destroying my life. It wasn't the problem that sent me into hiding. It was me. It was my response. And the longer I was in hiding, it forces you to keep thinking like a hider. And you don't realize what you're really hiding is your gift. You're hiding your love from people. You're hidden from what you were made for. As all we do is protect ourselves, we fail to live our own life. I think the good news is every one of us can come out of hiding. The world changes. That's part of the most joyful part of my journey is being able to watch other people in my life. It wasn't part of my plan. It just happened. Other people in my life just say, can I do that too? And there's some people in my life that have just done the same thing. When I came out of hiding, I just became very bold and upfront with the real me. After spending my whole life running from a scale, running from the topic, I remember being a school teacher. And if I heard a student in the room say the word fat, my body would get hot. I would get nervous. Even if they were just back in the corner with some buddies talking about a fat cat, the word fat would just send me this whole different realm. Couldn't approach the topic. When I came out of hiding, I approached it boldly. I started a Facebook group, grew to like 70 people. And I said, every day I'm going to tell you how much I weigh. I'm going to send you a picture of what I weigh. But on top of that, I'm going to send you a video and I'm going to tell you why I weigh what I weigh, because it wasn't about food. And so I just began to be very vocal about it. And there's someone very dear in my life who was following my story. This is why I love your podcast. In my story, she heard her story. She called me on the phone one time and she came out of hiding and she said some things about her life that nobody ever knew, things that happened to her. She came out of hiding. And one of the things that happened in her life when she was around age 12, she began to stutter very severely. And everyone who knows Sharon knows that she stutters very severely. And she has since she was a little girl. Everybody would think that's her problem. But that day on the phone, she told me things that happened to her when she was a little girl that she hadn't told anybody, awful things that happened to her. And I was like, oh my gosh. And when she finally came out of hiding, she found freedom. Probably a month after that phone call, she sent my wife and I a video message and she said, I never talk about this, but it's time for me to stop stuttering. See, when people go into hiding, it causes problems in our life, behavior problems, mental problems, in her case, a stuttering problem. When we go into hiding, it destroys our life. And then we try to fix what's destroyed, but you can't. Humans, we can't fix what's destroyed. What we can do is come out of hiding, though, and our life can find freedom and change. A month after that, I was on Facebook. Sharon was doing a Facebook Live video, which she never does. When you stutter severely, you don't get on Facebook and talk to people. But she was, and I clicked on it. And you can still see this on Facebook today. She was speaking for about 2 minutes and 35 seconds, if I recall. And she was giving a bold proclamation to the world that we should all be the hands and feet of Jesus. No matter what's happening with COVID, we should all be the hands and feet of Jesus today. And you would have to listen very closely to hear her stutter one time. She found freedom. And that's why I'm so passionate about this message of freedom. Vulnerability is the pathway to it, because vulnerability is not about just being honest about our problems. Vulnerability is about leaving the hiding place of our life so we can really live. When we human beings stop being afraid of our weakness, we can find the gift within us and find what it means that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness.
I love what you're saying about being vulnerable. I love what you're saying. I hear transparency. That's the word I would use. That's what I hear when you say that. I don't like being vulnerable. I want to hide in my shell. I want to stay there. It's safe there. It's warm there. It's dark there. I can sleep there. What's the danger if guys are in that moment right now?
I'm telling you, if you told me, you get a far different response. Like I said earlier, as a man, the most horrific thought of telling someone else what's wrong with me is what they will do with me. There's a beautiful story in scripture of the prodigal son who's a human being whose ambitions, passions cause him to just go live his life, to go fulfill his wildest dreams, however long a period of time. And he blows everything and ruins everything and ends up just in a pig pen of what life became. He did the hardest thing ever, which is stick his head out of that turtle shell and go home and say, here I am, the pathetic person that I am. And the beautiful story, the parable Jesus told, is that the father runs to him and does nothing but put a cape or a robe around his neck, ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. We're throwing a party. The father only saw what this human was made for. You would think that's like the best part of the story. The story time is over with Jesus. I think Jesus, in telling this parable, he was talking to a bunch of religious people. I think he told the parable to make a greater point that he wanted to make to those people, because then he talked about the prodigal son's brother who was jealous, who was judgmental. And he's basically saying, this is what you people are like. When a broken person with a problem comes home, you see them the wrong way, making a bold proclamation to them. You are like the brother. And I think this is the great fear. And many church people feel this way. They feel if they say a problem they have, they'll be asked to not volunteer anymore. They'll be sent out of the ministry. And so then we all end up being casual Sunday morning is really a convention of turtle shells. I used to be a pastor, probably still am in a different way, but I was the kind of pastor that you would normally think as a pastor. You get them preach on Sundays. And I remember this little church, there was a guy named Bill who was the church drunk and everyone knew it. He only came once a month. I was a young guy. I had never been drunk in my life. I thought it was bad to get drunk. But I didn't know what it was really. I just knew he was a drunk and I was like, I had no idea how to help him. And now I see it very differently. I realized that I was him and he was me. I just had a different substance. My alcohol was food. My pornography was food. Food was doing to me what alcohol was doing to him. Food was doing to me what pornography was doing to someone else. I was like, there's no difference. So I look back and I'm like, I was Bill. I just had this socially acceptable substance that people don't connect it the way they look at alcohol or pornography or gambling. I think the opportunity all of us have in our life is not to just live free, but to help other people live free. Scripture says we are ministers of reconciliation, which means to me that you and we get to be like the prodigal son's father to people. If a person ever sticks their head out of the turtle shell and they say, I'm struggling with this, we get to be the first person to look at them and say, what's your gift? You have a gift. We get to be people that look right past their problem and talk to them about what they're made for. So that's a beautiful opportunity all of us have with our lives. In part of our program, we get to a point where we ask people to tell their story. We don't ask them to tell it for the purpose of studying it. If there's a story in your life you're afraid to tell, you must tell it. But we qualify it. We say, listen, it's not because you need to fix it. It's not because you need to undo it. It's not because you need to study it. You need to tell one trusted person who lives like a free person and just tell them. That helps you come out of hiding. Tell it to someone who will flush it immediately and simply put the robe back around your neck.
I think so often, though, again, I go back to this, that when men are vulnerable or men start to get vulnerable or start to get transparent, start to get transformed, I think there is a little bit of judgment that comes out. I think the older brother in the prodigal story shows up and says, wait a second, you need to do 7 of this before you can come and do this.
Yeah.
Confess this to this person before you can do this. Go get 7 months of counseling before you can really come back. I don't read that in my gospel.
No.
I say my gospel only because of the fact I think it reads the same for everyone, truly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misreading it. When I see Jesus with the woman in the act of adultery, when I see Jesus with the Pharisees, and he's like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You don't get it.
I would rather people live a seemingly clean life inside of their turtle shell than deal with the messes. Dealing with the messes is where freedom is. How about Peter, a person with a massive calling on his life, a massive sense of mission? The worst moment, probably he could have done this. He did something opposite of everything he believed. Probably at the worst moment. He was someone who proclaimed to Jesus, I don't care what happens. I'm going to be right there. I'm going to be one of the people with you. You can always count on me. And then at the worst moment when Jesus is going through the ordeal of before the crucifixion, and Peter rejects him, denies him 3 times. But then after the resurrection, Jesus appears to Peter and he doesn't ask him, why did you do that? He didn't point him to a therapeutic program. He didn't ask him if he had trouble with authority. You have problems with your dad growing up. He just looked at Peter. He said, do you love me? Feed my sheep. What are you made for? Go live your purpose. Completely agree with you. There's this freedom to be had for people. And the greatest gift I have in my life right now, I'm surrounded by people who get it. And I can speak to them of weakness and they don't flinch. They don't gasp. Meet with some dudes at Denny's once a week on Monday mornings. We call ourselves the Denny's dudes. We meet to talk about our purpose and how we're living out our purpose. We don't meet to talk about our problems, although anyone can. Anyone at that table knows they can say anything at that table. No one at that table is going to go, oh, we need to check in on you. There was a guy that used to be in that group. He started a different group, and I love this guy. He's a big Greek guy. He's very bold and loud. And when he was in that group, he was known for saying something. If someone talked about a struggle they were having, he'd look around the whole restaurant, and you might think he was making sure nobody was hearing what he was about to say. But actually with Chris, he wanted to make sure everybody heard what he was about to say. And I'm going to say the cleaned up version of what he would say. If you said, I watched pornography last week, Chris would cut you off and he'd say, Neil, you know what's wrong with you? He'd say, you're messed up and nothing's wrong with you. That's what he would say. Nothing's wrong with you. Feels like all of culture, if you tell someone your problem, sirens go off and here comes all the rescuers. Everyone's going to help you change your problem. And it's the worst kind of help to get because the problem is not the problem. It's how we think about the problem that's the problem. And the step to freedom is, we need to be vulnerable and not hide our problem. The first focus needs to be like Peter's, go feed my sheep, like go live your life, go make a difference, go live your purpose. In this case, I'll be freedom dealers to people. People can tell us their problem. Matter of fact, pretty much the first thing I ever say to anybody, the man comes to me and he's been drinking heavily for a year. He'll admit it. And the first thing I'll say to him is, there's nothing wrong with you. And then we talk about what he was made for. And usually what happens is they stop drinking. Not because I told him stop drinking, compel him to start living. It's not about the alcohol. It's not about the porn. It's not about that. It's not about the food.
Maybe you've heard of this band, the Newsboys?
Yes.
They have this amazing song. Had to find the lyrics, make sure I got it right. It says, I am free to run. I am free to dance. I am free to live for you. I am free. Yes, I am free.
Yeah.
That's what I hear when you're speaking, by the way. I keep hearing Peter Furler's voice, Australian, as amazing as it is in my head right now. Copyright reasons won't allow. You can go check that out, those that are curious. Free to run, free to dance, free to live. I am free. I would imagine right now, in this moment, if we could somehow time travel and you could go back to 10-year-old Mark, what would you say to him?
Mark, people need you. And it doesn't matter that you'll be flawed all the way through the journey. People need you. That's what I would say.
Would he believe you?
Probably not. I don't think at that age there would be enough understanding of who I was as a person. So no, I don't think he would. Honestly, I think the most important things that we need to believe about our life, I think we need someone else to help us believe it. And by that, I don't mean a therapist. I mean good people, like my wife has been for me. I understand Grace because of who she's been to me. I have large amounts of courage now as a man. I know you've never had courage. I was too busy chasing comfort to have courage. Now I have large doses of courage. The reason I do is because I have good friends in my life that believe in me, and they prove it with how they talk to me. And their belief in me gives me belief. No, I don't think the 10-year-old version of me would believe it.
You mentioned having these guys around you. I grew up in a military family. My dad's a former Marine. There's this expression, I have your six. In other words, I have your back.
Mm-hmm.
How does one find that person? I've even called it the Bubba from Forrest Gump. Tom Hanks has this amazing quote in Forrest Gump. He says, Bubba was my best good friend, and he died right there by that river in Vietnam. And even I know that's not something you can just get down the road. That phrase has always stuck with me. That's something you can't just get down the road. word. Friendship isn't something you can just pick up at Costco. Friendship isn't something that you can get on Amazon. You can't find it on eBay. I've looked, I've tried.
Yeah.
Where does one find that? That six, that person that can have their six, that can be their best friend. It's not like you can take applications. I don't think they're on LinkedIn even.
I think you have to, this is where the vulnerability thing and the whole danger of being that turtle in the shell is, if you're in the shell, you'll never find it. I think there's times in that shell where we do want it. There's something stirs up enough for us to want something like that. And then we have this battle. But can I trust people? Should I protect myself? I can't let my reputation go through the ringer. I can't let people reject me. There's all these fears that prevent us from putting ourselves out there. The simple visual of the turtles, like lake, and there's 30 turtles on the shore. You have to stick your head out in order to find someone else who's got their head out. And there's probably some little eyes that you can see peeking through the hole in the turtle shell that are people that are like, what are you doing sticking your head out? What's wrong with you? There's going to be some of that for sure. But you find the people who have their head out. This is the scary thing. You can't find the people if your head's in the shell. You have to put yourself out there a little bit. You do have to do it wisely. You just can't say anything like in a church small group, let's say. Like there's a lot of turtles in a church small group, trust me, because churches kind of teach you to be in your shell. They kind of not wanting to, but that's what we do. Me as a man, I had a lot of superficial relationships. When I stuck my head out, I just felt like men kept coming to me. Then you get to where you can just smell it. You smell freedom in people. The words of freedom, like they just ring out. To me, it happened very organically, not until I came out. But I had an advantage in that my problem was food. And unfortunately, in our culture, if you have a problem with gambling or pornography, drinking, people are less likely to help you find freedom and instead give judgment. So fortunately for me, I have a lot of men who come to me with whatever kind of problems. It's so easy for me to relate to them and understand them. One guy said to me, we hadn't started doing the program I do with him yet. He's like, I don't know how you can relate to me. He said, a couple of years ago, I had an affair on my wife and got divorced. And I said, I can't relate to you. I was you. The difference was I didn't sleep with a woman. I just ate food in front of my wife endlessly for years, right in front of her face. I'm choosing this food over you. I'm choosing this food over honesty. I'm choosing this food over intimacy. I was having affairs with biscuits in front of my wife daily. I was what you were. And so it's easy for me to relate and be like, it's the same thing. Culture just looks at it differently. And that's why it's about freedom. It's not about the problem. It's about freedom. But the way we culturally look at problems keeps people from the freedom that can be had.
I think that's a great analogy on so many levels. You have this famous saying, when common people take uncommon steps with common people, miracles become common.
Yeah.
I think that is the most I've heard the word common in one phrasing ever, by the way. From a marketing standpoint, I don't know about that. When common people take uncommon steps with common people, miracles become common.
Yeah.
Who came up with that and what was the thought process?
That came out of my life. I don't want to say I came up with it. It came out of my life. That's all life has been for me since I came out of hiding, which was my flight point. I lived a life where the only thing that mattered was comfort and security and a little bit of reputation. And I was descending as a man. Like if I was in a plane, it was descending. There was going to be a crash landing at some point. Since I've come out of hiding, I look at life very simply. There are two things I must do consistently. One is trust the people under my nose. I don't look for famous people. I don't look for what a popular person is, whatever is doing. I look to the people right underneath my nose. And number two, take the next step. And usually it's together. Take next steps, people in your life. And I have just found when common people just take each other seriously, take steps, amazing things happen. If I could draw a picture, I'll just draw it using words. If you could draw a stick figure, every body part, separate them so none of them are touching each other. You see the stick figure, but all the body parts are just, there's a gap between all of them. I have found this is how most people live their life. We're close to people, but not connected to people. And so our lives, the potential of our lives is so minimized. If I can put the tiniest of gap between my hand and my wrist, my hand is capable of nothing. But because my hand is connected to my wrist, it's capable of so many things. If people will live connected, which requires coming out of that turtle shell, shell, to be real. Like, you can't be connected until you're real. If people will be real with each other, we can be connected to each other and we can do awesome things together. Honestly, that's been the story of my life the last 6 years. I was just a school teacher. I was descending as a man. And one day I was reading a book. The first line of the book said, "Stop living as if the goal of life is to arrive at death safely." And I told my wife I'm leaving the school, and there was no plan. I just had to get out of this cage I was living in. If I looked at life, I had to go fly. In that journey, all I've done is just take uncommon steps with common people. And I feel like miracles keep happening. Miracles of common miracles, like people learning to love each other again. Common miracles. The story I told of my sister earlier, who stopped stuttering. She started to focus on her purpose instead of her problem. Common miracles of, I got an email from a former student. He was in this Christian school I taught at, and he was the perfect human in every way. He was 22 and he sent me this email, and he said, ever since I left the school, went off to college, I became addicted to pornography, gaming, and food. I've been depressed and suicidal for 2 years. He said, I'm tired of hiding. I responded to him and I said, we're going to meet once a week, but we're not going to talk about food or pornography or gaming or depression or suicide. We're only going to talk about your purpose. And that young man, when he brought, that story chills me, he brought his head out of the shell and he said, here's who I am. And all we did at that moment is put the robe back around his neck and start dreaming again of the life he was made for. And that young man moved on. He started to live. He took flight. He didn't fix his problems and then go live. He started to live again, and living again fixed his problems. I believe with all my heart, if we will come out of our turtle shell, there will be people that'll go, oh, you're not, you shouldn't. That's always going to be there. But there are other people that are waiting and their head is out. And by the way, there are other people that will see us stick our head out of that shell and they'll be like, I've been waiting for someone to give me the courage to do that. And that's what we can all be to people. And it's a common miracle.
You said earlier when you were telling your version of the prodigal son story, you said he put a cape around him and then you kind of stopped and you said, nope, actually he put a robe around him. I want to challenge that. I liked what you said. We're going to go with cape. I know that's not scripturally accurate, but we're going to go with cape. And here's why. You might remember this. In the Lord's Supper, Jesus disrobes, puts a towel around himself, and he goes to wash the disciples' feet. Recently, I heard somebody say, in regards to serving others, that we have to put the towel on. And I kind of liked that. It kind of resonated with me. And I thought, because so many people are throwing in the towel, they don't want to serve. Rather than throwing in the towel, we're putting on the towel to serve, which I kind of liked. Cape, again, instead of robe. I like that better because I think so many times as men, we've taken off the cape, ceased to become Superman in the cape. And I don't know, there wasn't a boy around on some level that probably didn't, when they first saw Superman, didn't put on a bed sheet or a towel and put on a cape and pretend to be Superman and try to fly. I know I did. I know I stood on the edge of the couch with my towel on around my neck and tried to jump off and hope I could fly. Granted, I didn't. I was a penguin and probably just landed flat. There's so much power in putting on the towel in this respect. Not only to serve others, put on that towel, not in a Jesus sense of wrapping us around it, but put on the towel from the standpoint of putting on the towel to fly, to make it a cape and to fly, Mark. So I want to acknowledge that, and I want to just throw in my little cape analogy because I thought it was good when you said it. I was like, nope, he's talking about Superman. He's not talking about the prodigal son here. Anyway, your response to that.
I'm sitting here looking at the book that I wrote, and in the early pages is a picture of a little boy with bath towel around his neck as a cape to talk about the life that we want to live.
Did I know that ahead of time?
No, you did not.
We have to share that. I think that's synergized or a Holy Spirit moment. So
when I hear of a man who's drinking too much or doing anything too much, the first thing I look at is not the problem in his hand. I want to see his back, because if his cape isn't on, that is his only problem. A man who is not living with the cape of purpose around his neck, I would say this, he has to have a substance in his hand. If a man does not get to live out with his life the passion of his heart, which is a lot of it is just the little boy with the bath towel. That's the passion of our heart. If a man doesn't get to live out that passion, the burden is too great. And I would say he has to drink. He has to turn to pornography. He has to turn to drugs. But the good news is when that happens, we don't have to rush in with all of the fix your problem people. We can rush in and see how quickly we can get a cape back around the man's neck. Because that's the only way a person's going to have power to face their problem and overcome it. Because the biggest hindrance for most people, this was my biggest hindrance. The back of my book is a picture of a stick figure, a person in a prison cell with a big problem. The problem is we think we have to fix our problem before we can be free. And actually, the only way we can overcome our problem is if we first become free. Yeah, the cape thing, think that way on a regular basis.
So guys in general are trading their cape for kryptonite.
Yeah. We tend to think if there's kryptonite, there's something wrong with me. No, there's kryptonite everywhere. There always will be kryptonite. What we tend to think is, oh, there's kryptonite. I can't wear my cape. Vulnerability is there's kryptonite. I must wear my cape. That is our power against kryptonite, is wearing your cape, flying. Don't get rid of kryptonite. Keep your cape on.
Well, Mark, you mentioned a book. You mentioned some of the things that you're using to help folks. How can people hear more about that? Where's the best place to go? All that fun stuff.
The book just released yesterday, actually, One Step to Freedom. It's on Amazon, One Step to Freedom. The subtitle is Leaving the Habit You Hate to Live the Life You Love. I don't desire to be an author. I don't consider it an accomplishment. It's just work. It's a monkey off my back because I had to, the information I've learned in life, I had to share it with people. And that's why it's out. My website is markdelaney.com. People can learn more about our work there. Basically, what we help people do is know their purpose and put their cape on and go live.
No social medias? You guys aren't big on like Instagram or
I do a little
Twitter?
bit of Facebook. Right. We're pretty much word of mouth people. I think nobody knows who to trust in this life. No one knows who to trust for help. I don't want to be the next guy in line saying, hey, come over and talk to me. Because everyone's like, oh, you're full of crap. You just want my money. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm sorry. Other people will have to tell people about the work that we do. I don't want to play games with people's lives on the internet. Maybe we'll find some way eventually of just putting out help, but not sales pitches.
Well, you mentioned the book is available on Amazon. I know in your preparation for being here, sometimes people get nervous about what we're going to ask or what's going to happen. But there's one more place you forgot. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's old age kicking in. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're also going to feature it on our website called opspodcast.com/books that I love. It'll be on our website as well. Hope that's okay.
Outstanding. That's outstanding. It's wonderful. That means a lot to me. I know it can help people, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's just our way of honoring you in that respect and giving folks an opportunity to, especially holiday time. If you're a reader or if you know hard to find person, sometimes it's a great book to get. As we wrap up today, Mark, I want to give you an opportunity. Again, if somebody is in this moment right now and they're in their shell, they've taken off the cape. I mean, all these analogies that we've used, all these metaphors that we've used, what would be your message to them?
You're one step from freedom. Your life can feel so trapped. In that cage you're living in, you might have seemingly 10 problems. Bad news, you can't fix those problems. Good news, good news is you can leave them. All those problems are in that cage. The door is open and you can have freedom. And when you have freedom, your life changes. So don't listen to anything we've said and think you should go fix your life. Everything we've said today is go put your cape on and walk out of the cage of how you think about your problems. Go live your purpose.
Love it. Well, again, Mark, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate the time that you gave us. Felt like we had some silliness, some moments of fun. Kind of some serious heavy stuff too. So I always like to end with something a little silly. So I know you're a big North Carolina fan. You were telling me that in the pre-flight show, right? You were saying that, I thought.
No, Ohio State.
No, I really thought you were a North Carolina fan. Really? Okay. So you're going to be a nut here in a sense and be a Buckeye. Is that what we're going to say?
Buckeye.
Tried to get in our preparation for today. I tried to get a Buckeye cup for our silliness that we do at the end of the show. Apparently Amazon's like, that's not a team you order, Neil. So we're not going to send that to you. I'm like, thankfully, because I don't want that. I mean, a Wolverine cup would have sufficed. Ooh, too soon? Anyway, we do this silly thing at the end of the show. It's called Senseless, the 6 random questions. And so we use a die to make it random. So I'm going to roll for you if you're okay with that.
Okay.
All right. You brought a cup, but no die. So I really should have people do that next season, I think. Anyway, here we are. You got number 5. It's even a light blue 5. Did you notice?
Yeah.
All right. Just checking. All right. So number 5 is this. You find yourself sitting in first class. I know you don't like to fly very often, but here we are. You find yourself sitting in first class next to you. So whether you're in the aisle seat, whether you're in the middle, I don't know, you're in the window, wherever you are in the plane, and you look over and someone famous is sitting there. Who's sitting there?
Oh, the first thought that came to mind is Michael Jordan. That's just the first famous person that came to mind. Not that I would need him to be or want them to be even.
Is it because of the North Carolina thing? Is that why?
Maybe that's the connection.
And the flight thing? That's funny. That would
maybe
be funny.
So.
All
Like you
right.
said,
But who would you want it to be? I mean, would you want it to be Mike? I guess I should say Michael. Michael now.
I would prefer that the person I look over and see is my wife. I'd prefer that I look over and it's my brother David, who lives in Indiana. I'd prefer that I look over and it's my buddy Chris. I'd prefer it's my buddy Adam. I am so captivated by common people in my real life that I know, and they know me. Fame is not interesting to me. People I know and love and know me, they captivate me. So I would want to talk to those people.
I like it. I like the take that you took there. That's good. Well, again, Mark, I want to say thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate the time that you gave us.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, hope you have everything stowed below and your seatbelt is on. The captain, me, has put on the seatbelt sign as we begin to land. I'm always taken back in moments like this. There's so many things that Mark doesn't even know that he invoked in me today. There's so many time machine moments, one of my favorite questions to ask. So I'm going to ask it of you right now. What's your moment? Where would you go? I know we're on a plane in our imaginations. Time machines fly. At least it did in the second version of Back to the Future. Where are you going to fly and time travel back to right now in this moment? Take yourself there, would you, in your imagination? Maybe it's you at 12. Maybe it's you at 16. Maybe it's you at 20. Maybe it's you last week. I want you to do that in your mind right now. I want you to go back in time with me, wherever that moment is for you, and ask yourself this question. Does that younger you have the freedom to fly? Has that older you been holding on to kryptonite that has been crippling them? Are they ready to trade the kryptonite for the cape? Let me know. You can let me know at opspodcast.com. It's a great place to let me know. You can let us know on our socials at OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but certainly not least, do not forget, remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Stay tuned until next week. We'll be right back here with you as we walk, or is it we fly, in other people's shoes. Well, this is Neil with Other People's Shoes. There was this amazing CD that came out when I was a kid, Jars of Clay. And I remember listening to their album. It was on a CD, by the way. And there was this pause kind of length, the end of the song, and there was a hidden track. It wasn't one of those tracks you could select. You had to listen to the last track, and I think they would allow you to fast forward. That's what this is. It's a hidden track. So if you've made it this far, congratulations. I have a little surprise for you. Next week's episode is going to start our new season. I'm really excited about it. The first episode, I'm going to tell you right now, is a little emotional. Here's a little sneak peek of what you can expect next week.
Dear listener, welcome into Other People's Shoes, Season 17, entitled Dear. This season, we venture into emotional territories as we explore words left unsent through this intimate process of writing a letter that was never meant to reach its recipient. The raw, unfiltered authenticity that speaks volumes in these letters. These unrevealed stories, confessions, and reflections held within these letters until now are powerful. Welcome to Dear. Sincerely, Other People's Shoes.
That is right. We're calling it Dear. Now, again, the idea behind it is sending a letter to someone that maybe you have no opportunity to send it to, or maybe you were too afraid to. Who knows why? We're going to explore those letters, and you're not going to want to miss next week as we kick off Season 17. Thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.